You go to save and leave spending more. That's the Costco problem. The same playbook that once made it unbeatable. Loss leader chicken at the back, oversized packs that feel cheap, free samples that slow you down, a no-friction return policy now pushes you into paying more for things you don't need, in sizes you won't finish, at quality that isn't always best in class. Bulk isn't a bargain when the unit price isn't lowest or half of it becomes trash. Several house brand staples aren't the best value anymore. With tariffs, packaging, and energy costs pushed onto the shelf, the fortress isn't protecting you. You're funding it at the register. This investigation shows what not to buy, how the psychology works against you, and how to avoid the traps that turn cheap trips into expensive habits. Let's start. Part 1. How Costco makes you feel like you're winning. Walk the wide aisle and the store starts whispering to you in numbers. Not the big price in the middle, but the tiny cues most people miss. A tag ending in 0.97 means the price has been cut from where it started. The quiet footprint of a clearance. A 0.49 or 0.00 is a manager stepping in to push it out the door. And the small asterisk in the top right corner is the last flare before disappearance. Last chance. No restock. A trained eye turns these symbols into a map. And once you learn to read it, you stop wondering whether you should wait. You already know what happens next. Follow that map and it leads you through a choreography designed to make you feel smart for buying more. The rotisserie chicken sits at the back like a low-price beacon, a $5 promise floating on warm air. If you're the kind of viewer who likes to see what's really behind the menu boards, make sure you're here for the next deep dive and subscribe. You walk to it past towers of nuts, new season hoodies, a pyramid of olive oil, a crate of baking mix, each one placed to catch the corner of your eye. The chicken is a bargain by design, a lure strong enough to pull an extra $25 of unplanned comfort into your cart without a word being spoken. Later as you leave, there is the other relic of stubborn pricing, a hot dog and a soda for $1.50. It tastes like proof that someone still remembers the meaning of a deal. And as you take the last sip, you don't tally the receipt. You tally the feeling that the trip was cheap. That feeling is not an accident. It is the closing note of a song written to be remembered. Bulk is the chorus. The stack of paper towels looks like certainty. The tub of detergent looks like prudence. The math is often true for things that do not spoil, a 20 to 40% drop in cost per unit for families who can store it and use it. But food turns the bargain on you. Households already throw away a shocking share of what they buy, and oversized produce accelerates the slide from fresh to forgotten. The giant box of greens wilts while the week races by. The spice jar the size of a softball loses its punch by the time the weather changes, leaving you with color but not flavor. Bulk is only a victory if you can eat it, freeze it, or share it before it stops being itself. Otherwise, the savings leak out of the calendar. Kirkland sits in the middle of this logic like a quiet password. The label means you are paying less because a marketer didn't pay to make you feel more. Batteries that hold their charge like the famous brand next to them. Beans roasted by a name you already trust, sealed in larger bags that look like a plan. Wine that surprises you because the bottle costs what lunch used to. The gap comes from what is missing: celebrity spokespeople, glossy ad campaigns, layers of distribution. 15 to 30% often falls away when the performance is priced instead of the performance around it. But the house brand is not perfect. A paper towel that gives up early. Detergent that leaves a stubborn mark behind. Tuna that feels soft when you want it to flake. Bacon that shrinks in the pan and makes you wonder where it went. Toilet paper that splits the room between price and comfort. The lesson is simple and disloyal. Test, trust selectively, and never love a label more than you love outcomes. On weekend afternoons, the warehouse turns into a slow parade of tiny plates and paper cups. You accept a bite of something you didn't plan to buy, and the small favor scratches a part of your brain that wants to return it. You say thank you, you nod, and somehow the box goes into the cart. Samples do more than introduce new products. They thicken time. People stop, wait, and drift a little, and the longer you are inside, the more the store has a chance to win. The tables are rarely placed at random. A cracker in your hand, a cheese wheel within reach, a sip of protein shake, a stack of high-margin bars a few steps away. The offer is free, but the transaction is real. Hovering over all of it is a promise few retailers dare to keep. Bring it back if it fails you. Bring it back if you changed your mind. Bring it back if weeks passed and it still doesn't feel right. Most things, most of the time, with notable lines drawn around alcohol and tobacco, diamonds with papers, and electronics that ask for a decision inside 90 days. The policy is generous because the memory it creates is more valuable than the item it reclaims. A customer who feels safe to air becomes a customer who experiments, and a customer who experiments returns. Somewhere in a back office, a system watches for patterns that look like abuse. But on the floor, the rule feels simple. We will make this easy. That sentence is worth more than any billboard. Outside, the pumps are busy. The gas is clean and the price is lean. The difference on the sign enough to turn a detour into a ritual. You save a few dollars per fill and spend a few minutes in line, and the trade becomes part of your week. If you are the kind of person who keeps score, the membership pays for itself on gasoline alone. If you are the kind who keeps time, the math is closer. Inside, another quiet door is propped open for non-members. A shop card paid for by a friend turns into access. You can buy groceries, a hot dog, even fuel. No annual fee, just the plastic and the balance it carries. It works here and across borders, another pathway into the ecosystem without the oath. Enough visitors who try it decide they prefer the keys. By now, you can see how the design forms a loop. The price codes turn browsing into a hunt. The chicken turns a detour into a route. The hot dog turns a high total into a good mood. Bulk turns caution into pride. Kirkland turns branding into math. Samples turn minutes into momentum. Returns turn anxiety into permission. Gas turns distance into magnetism. Shop cards turn visitors into maybes. Each piece strengthens the next. You feel like you are outsmarting the system because the system is built to reward the feeling. You leave with the belief that you paid less than the world outside, that you got more than you would elsewhere, that you made a series of choices only a savvy shopper would make. The story is seductive because it is often true. It is also powerful enough to keep working when the numbers underneath begin to change. In that sense, Costco didn't just sell you goods. It sold you a predictable version of yourself, the one who knows the code on the tag, who zigzags with purpose toward the chicken, who grabs the bulk item with a private smile, who pockets a small win at the food court and drives away with a tank that cost a little less. That identity is hard to surrender, even when the totals start to climb. And that is why, when the walls of the fortress flex, many people don't see it immediately. The habits they built here still make them feel like they are winning. The rules they learned still mostly work. The map still leads through the same terrain. Only later, when the bills are compared and the pantry turns over faster than the paychecks do, does the question surface. What changed? And when did it start? Part 2. The Break. 5 Essentials that Spiked. Something broke quietly before anyone said it out loud. The bills that once bent around a membership card began to stiffen, and the pressure did not come from a single place. It came from everywhere at once. New import duties lifted the floor beneath foods America does not grow enough of. Canada tightened the spigot on wheat and oats in a retaliatory shuffle that turned a short, reliable route into a longer, more expensive one. California's drought pushed yields down while labor costs climbed. Metals used to seal and protect food grew pricier with fresh taxes, and the electricity that keeps warehouses cold and bright rose in step. Staffing gaps made those warehouses slower and dearer to run. None of these shocks alone would have toppled the illusion. Together, they stacked like slate and settled onto the same shelf where families shop. Start in the baking aisle where memory still believes in cheap flour. A home baker reaches for what used to be the safest bag in the cart, a 2-kilo staple that hovered around $7 for years and made birthdays and Sundays taste like home. Now the tag reads 15, sometimes 17, and in certain states the number is so out of character it looks like a misprint near 70. She flips the bag as if the back might offer an excuse. The wheat that once came straight from clean northern fields now travels farther from Europe or Australia, its price swollen by distance and time. The diner owner down the road feels it more brutally. 50 bags a week once turned into crusts and crumbles and morning rolls that kept the lights on. Add $7 to each bag, and the margin thins into a whisper. Menus contract. The bakery case looks like a memory of itself. The pivot is as unromantic as it is necessary. Split sacks with neighbors. Watch regional promotions that flare and fade without warning. Consider oat, almond, or rice flour when the spread favors it, not because it is fashionable, but because the arithmetic says so. In a country raised on all-purpose, this is not a trend story. It is a survival one. Turn to the oil that doctors have blessed for a generation. A 2-liter bottle of extra virgin once cost about $18 and felt like a small luxury most kitchens could still afford. Now, the same bottle crosses $36 without blinking. The reasons are written in geography and policy. Spain and Italy carry new duties into American ports. California groves fight drought and payroll in the same season. The price refuses to float back down. A retiree with a cardiac diet stands in the aisle, compares labels, and reaches for a cheaper seed oil with a quiet apology to himself. It is not a culinary choice. It is a budget decision dressed as one. There is a way to lose less ground. Track the rotating promotions that occasionally cut through the haze. If you must substitute, choose canola or flax over the very cheapest blend. Buy smaller so you do not pay for rancidity. These are not upgrades. They are guardrails against a slow slide in health dressed up as savings. The freezer tells the story without any empty shelves. Chicken is there, just thinner in spirit. A parent lifts a 2-kilo bag of frozen breast, remembers paying $8 or $9, and sets it back at $16 with a small shake of the head. Sausages meant for quick weeknight plates creep up week by week. No announcement, no sign, just a steady climb that turns routine into reconsideration. The birds still grow, the plants still run. The cost creeps in through the seams. Aluminum and steel for packaging carry new taxes. Electricity and extended cold storage eat away at the margin. By the way, make sure you're here for the next deep dive and subscribe. Labor commands more because fewer hands are available to do the cold work. Nothing is scarce, yet everything is dearer. There are ways to resist the drift. Compare the per-pound price on fresh versus frozen instead of trusting habit. Use beans or canned fish to bridge a week without surrendering protein altogether. Do not pay extra for clever packaging that does nothing for dinner. Coffee refuses to yield for a different reason. A factory worker who wakes at 5 sets the bag in the cart anyway because the ritual keeps the day steady even as the number on the tag climbs from 11 or 12 to 21. The beans did not vanish. Costs did what costs do in a system under pressure. Containers from Central America doubled in price for a while. Warehouse rents were repriced. Contracts that once held for years were forced open and written again under worse stars. Green beans from Colombia, Ethiopia, and Guatemala carried indirect duties and friction that never touched the cup, but sat heavy on the invoice. People buy the bag because they must, and that makes it the easiest product to tax with time. There is a way to bend without breaking. Split the 3-pound bag with a friend. Grind at home so you pay for flavor, not for someone else's stale convenience. Choose lighter roasts that carry more caffeine per scoop and stretch farther. Check the roast date like it is a use-by stamp. The goal is not to drink less joy, it is to waste less money. Supplements live near the entrance for a reason. Health first, the layout says. And for years, the prices nodded in agreement. A multivitamin for 3 months, around $12. Fish oil, glucosamine, calcium, magnesium, collagen lined up like a to-do list you could afford. Then, in the summer of a hard year, the labels did not shout, they shuffled. 13 became 15, then 18, until many bottles crossed 20, and specialty items like CoQ10 or high-dose D3 nearly doubled. The pill did not get rarer. The bottle did. Plastics fell under domestic protection rules that felt abstract until they hit the shelf. Labels printed in Canada picked up tariffs on the way back. Storage and quality control costs surged where staffing stayed thin. A senior lines up a week's pills in a plastic tray and does a new kind of math. A full preventive stack pushes toward $100 a month before a single prescription is counted. Something has to give, and it is rarely the rent. The intelligent retreat is to prioritize with a clinician's guidance, to compare pharmacy generics that often match composition to time purchases to the coupon books that swing through like tides, and to avoid mega bottles that expire before they can help. Across these aisles, the pattern repeats. Then to now is a simple arrow with a steeper slope than most people have seen in their adult lives. The reasons are specific in each case and identical in spirit. Policy reaches into trade, weather reaches into yield, energy reaches into storage, labor reaches into time, packaging reaches into everything. The increases do not declare themselves the way empty shelves would. They arrive as a series of small betrayals that change behavior a little at a time. The home baker skips a weekend. The diner trims a menu and loses a regular. The retiree trades down and calls it temporary. The parent rearranges a week of dinners around what will cost least grief at the register. The worker buys the coffee anyway and gives up something less visible. What matters most is the lesson behind the labels. Scarcity is not the engine of this moment. Stacked costs are. They sit on top of products that used to feel immune to the news cycle and push them into a new category. Not rare, just more expensive to keep cold, to pack, to ship, to stock, to insure, to sell. In a store built to make you feel like every decision is a win, that is the first time the win feels conditional. You can still beat the average, but only by changing the way you shop. You split and share. You stalk the calendar. You read the fine print on a unit price. You defend health by choosing the least bad substitute, not the cheapest one with the loudest label. You buy what you will finish before it stops being itself. You preserve the ritual that keeps you steady by trimming the parts that only look like value. Behind each adjustment is the same quiet admission. The fortress did not fall. It just raised the drawbridge a few feet, and the effort to cross is now yours. Part 3. The psychology that keeps you spending. The price hikes should have slowed people down. They didn't. They changed the story in our heads instead. You enter with a number you can't control and reach for the parts of the trip that make you feel like you still can. The first is the aroma that lives at the back of the building. A $5 chicken says you are still a clever shopper, still the kind of person who knows where value hides. That promise settles over everything that came before it in the cart. It is the halo of a loss leader, bright enough to light up the whole receipt. A father grabs 2 birds and tells himself dinner is solved for less than a takeout tip. The total will be higher than last month, but the memory that survives is the bargain he can point to. One visible win covers a dozen quiet losses. Near the exit, the ritual repeats at a smaller price. The hot dog and soda hold their ground against time and inflation and make the day end on your terms. It is not the calories that matter. It is the story your brain records right before you step outside. You leave with mustard on your fingers and the sense that the trip was frugal, even if the numbers said otherwise. That closing impression is not a trick. It is a final anchor hammered into the memory of the visit. When you compare stores later, you compare how they made you feel, and the place that handed you a cheap, satisfying meal will always look fairer than the one that did not. The small favors begin long before you reach the food court. A cube of cheesecake, a sip of something green, a crisp cracker that tastes like a decision already made. You take the sample and your mind nudges you toward repayment. Reciprocity is older than retail. A retiree with a list of 4 items leaves with 6 because a stranger handed him 1 free mouthful. He does not need to love the taste. He only needs to accept the gesture, and once he has, the geography around that table begins to look like destiny. The product being sampled is within reach, but so are its profitable neighbors, and no one announces the difference. The store lets time do the rest. The line at the sample slows the aisle and adds 5 minutes to the trip. 5 minutes becomes a detour into a display that would have been a blur at walking speed. Dwell time is not an accident. It is the fuel that turns curiosity into weight in the cart. Bulk looks like certainty in uncertain years. You see a wall of toilet paper, and you see the opposite of the empty shelf you once met during a crisis. The box of detergent feels like insurance against a future where everything is more expensive. Scarcity leaves an imprint, and you answer it by buying like tomorrow will punish hesitation. The math is not always wrong. Sometimes it is perfect. Often it is only almost. A student couple spends more on a supersized jar of spice than they would have on the small one and loses the difference when flavor goes tired before finals. A mother reaches for the family-sized greens because the per-ounce price looks generous and throws away the last third on Thursday. Fear of missing a deal, fear of paying more later, fear of coming back to find the shelf empty again. Those fears are rational responses to recent memory, and they push you to overbuy when the real savings live in smaller, faster cycles you can finish. Membership adds another layer of momentum. You paid to enter the building, so you keep score. And the scoreboard is not a spreadsheet. It is a feeling that you must use what you bought access to. A man who lives 10 miles away chooses this store instead of the closer one because gas is cheaper and the fee should pay for itself. He fills his tank and goes inside to make the detour worth it. He does not need anything urgent. He walks out with paper goods stacked to the roof of his sedan and a sense of balance restored. This is sunk cost as a weekly routine. The more you have already spent to belong, the harder it becomes to say, "Today, you will not." Even small comforts become levers. Prices double on coffee, and people buy the bag anyway because the morning cup is the gear that keeps the day turning. The store reads that truth without saying it aloud. It does not need to sell a luxury. It needs to sell the preservation of a rhythm. A factory worker stands in the aisle and decides to cut dessert, not caffeine. The sacrifice feels reasonable, but the pattern is what matters. When essentials turn into anchors of identity, they are the safest places to add dollars because customers will defend them for you. 100 cents more on the ritual is easier to swallow than a quarter more on the plain bread no one loves. Big packages create illusions the eye quietly endorses. A gallon looks cheaper than a quart because it looks like more value even when the unit price whispers otherwise. The brain leans on shortcuts when the shelf is loud and the day is long. You read the largest number and call it savings because that is faster than hunting for the small print on the corner of the tag. In that space between impression and arithmetic, margins hide. Costco engineers that space less with words than with scale. The tower is tall, the pallet is full, the span of the aisle is wide. Abundance itself becomes a price signal. Layer these effects and they do not cancel out in an era of higher costs. They multiply. The chicken at the back neutralizes the shock in the baking aisle. The hot dog near the door erases a few dollars of regret. Samples slow you down just long enough to see the new seasonal item that sits beside a staple you came for. The memory of empty shelves makes the extra-large version feel like prudence. The membership card in your wallet turns a detour into a duty. The coffee defines a morning, so the sticker cannot define the choice. The large package looks like thrift, so the unit price can be ignored if it is inconvenient. Each bias protects the habit against the friction of rising prices. Each habit protects the store against the friction of your doubt. There is a social texture to this psychology that stretches beyond one retailer. People under pressure restructure how they judge fairness. When wages lag and invoices climb, $1.50 for a hot dog becomes a sign that someone out there is still on your side. That signal is powerful enough to keep you loyal even when totals creep upward in the aisles you pass to reach it. The store becomes a partner in stability, not because it lowered every price, but because it preserved totems that symbolize a promise. In that partnership, you forgive more, you overlook more, you rationalize more. You call a higher bill a temporary wave because the touchstones stayed where they always were. None of this makes customers foolish or weak. It makes them human in a built environment that has studied what humans do when faced with too many choices, too many numbers, too much uncertainty. The solution is not cynicism. It is awareness sharp enough to slow your hand by a second. Ask whether the bargain you feel is the bargain you are getting. Check the unit price even when the font is an insult. Compare fresh to frozen per pound, even when the family is hungry and the clock is mean. Keep the ritual you need and make economies somewhere that will not take a toll on your body later. Use the return policy to correct mistakes instead of to perform miracles. Treat samples as information, not as obligations. Part 4. The quiet squeeze on meals and communities. Kitchens tell the truth before statistics do. A grandmother stops baking on Sundays because the flour that once felt like sunlight in a bag now feels like a splurge. A diner in a town without a stoplight prints a smaller menu and hopes regulars won't notice the missing pies. A school cafeteria trims breakfast, replaces an orange with a carton of something sweet that lasts longer on a shelf. In thousands of homes, olive oil slides off the counter and cheaper seed oils take its place, not because anyone prefers them, but because a heart-healthy choice now costs as much as a small luxury. The shift is quiet, almost polite, but it reaches into habits that once felt unshakable. You do not announce that you are eating less chicken this month. You simply build dinners that can survive without it. The weekly total rises in increments that hide in the noise of life. $40 more with no extra items becomes a shrug the first time, a wince the second, a pattern the third. People respond the way people always have when budgets tighten. They skip, they substitute, they accept. Processing fills the space where freshness used to be, because processed foods wait for you. The fresh ones do not. Vitamin trays thin out on bathroom counters. A retiree chooses between fish oil and magnesium and tells himself he will buy both when prices settle, knowing they might not. The real cost shows up later in the body, not at the register. Small businesses feel the squeeze like a hand around the lungs. The pizza place that once bought sacks of flour and tubs of oil from the warehouse begins counting ounces the way a jeweler counts stones. A $7 jump per bag becomes a payroll problem, a price increase customers can't absorb, a decision to close Mondays, then Tuesdays. When a diner closes in a small town, it does not just remove breakfast, it removes a meeting place and the thin web that held neighbors together. A grocery bill can break a habit. Enough broken habits can bend a community. This is not the drama of empty shelves. It is the slow arithmetic of keeping cold, packing tight, pushing across borders, storing longer, paying more hands to do more careful work. It looks like abundance on a pallet and reads like pressure in a ledger. If the retailer most famous for holding the line has to lift it, smaller players will not find room to stand between you and the increase. Some will follow, some will vanish. What remains will be louder and fewer voices set the price of noise. There are signals that whisper what is coming next if you train yourself to listen. Asterisks appear on staples that never used to need farewell stars. Clearance endings turn over faster, a sign of aggressive resets that move product out to make room for something else that the math favors. Gas lines lengthen even when the sign shows only a shallow discount, a reminder that time, too, has an inflation rate. Coupon books drift from televisions and patio sets toward cooking oil and cereal, an admission that the fight has moved from wants to needs. The risk is not only that prices rise, it is that the new totals feel normal before anyone calls them what they are. A nation raised on the belief that scale alone can tame cost learns to live with versions of the staples that are less kind to the body, less kind to time. We build routines around compromises, and the compromises harden into custom. You can see it in shopping lists rewritten to emphasize what lasts and what fills. In dinner plates that do the job but do not feel like care. In the way people talk about groceries the way they once talked about rent. If this helped you see the landscape more clearly, like this video and subscribe for the next deep dive.